We sing songs all the time. There's a songbook here. And we sing to the glory of God in this songbook, song after song, to the glory of God. Every now and then when I lead music, I say, wouldn't it be nice to sing a song about yourself for a change? All the time, praising God. I say, there's one song in here that we get to sing about ourselves for a change. Page 121. Instead of just always singing praise to God, we get to sing about ourselves. Page 121. Isn't it nice to be able to sing about yourself? Not many wise men now are called. Don't know if that's so great singing that or not. But God definitely has glory. And that's part of the Feast of Tabernacles, is to recognize the glory of the great God who made all and who's going to do all, is brought out by the sermonette. The changes that man can't bring about, God can. Now, God has all this vast glory throughout the universe. The heavens declare it. Now, I have a question for you. Since we saw that in the songbook, does man have glory? That's a good question, isn't it? Now, you think about that a moment. We know God has glory. Does man have glory? Now, I'd like to ask you, how many of you think that man down here physical, that he has glory? How many of you think so? Oh boy, there aren't too many of you who think that man has glory. Well, I mean, there are some, but it's the small percentage. Let me tell you something. Man has glory. That's right. The Bible says that man has glory. Now, what would it be? What would it be that man has his glory? Now, let me give you a hint. Maybe if I give you a hint. Does woman have glory? Oh, there, right down here, Mrs. Oss said yes. She's nodding her head. Now, how many of you think that woman has glory? How many of you remember in the Bible that it says that woman has glory? And you remember what it is? Oh, there are a few more of you. See? You remember that. Now, that's a hint. See, as to whether man has glory. Now, how many of you remember what man's glory is? Oh, boy, so many of you know woman's glory and you don't know man's glory. I'll tell you, we ought to feel inferior, fellas. Well, the Bible tells us what woman's glory is. Let's turn over to that. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 15. This will be a further hint as to what man's glory is, because I can see this sermon's needed. There aren't many people who know. Wow. I want you to know I've got some glory too. I mean, after all, the man's supposed to be the top dog. The woman's got all the glory. Here it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 15, "But if a woman have long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given her for a covering." The glory of a woman is her hair. You know, these beauty contest winners, they know that. I know short hair comes in, that short and sassy becomes popular after the Winter Olympics. But most men still like it long and sexy. I don't know. They have them all accepted, just short and sassy. But hair is something, beauty parlor. You think about it. Women know where the glory is. Look at a beauty parlor. What do they go in? they ought to call it a hair parlor. How much is done in there besides to the hair? They realize the beauty, the glory of a woman is her hair. Now that's a hint. Now how many of you think you know what the glory of a man is? Oh, a few more hands. Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's right here in this same chapter. This very same chapter tells you what the glory of a man is. Oh. Notice what it says, the very last part of chapter 11 and verse 7. Well, we start off, for a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of God. But the woman is the glory of the man. Ooh, men, did you know that? Did you realize that your wife is your glory? Boy, that's really something. You know, men would like to think that they have their own glory. They're trying to be pretty now and dress like a peacock, have long, pretty hair, or like when they say a young man glories in his strength. Kind of like I was, when you walk to school, you always carry your books under your arm, makes it really look squeezed there, muscle kind of pops out. Tough. The young man really glories in his strength. But God says that the glory of a man is the woman. Now, just a second here. Just a second. If the glory of a man is the woman, what does that do? I mean, after all, I thought that the man was greater than the woman. After all, he used to be the big chief, tough, the leader, more intelligent. And that's the way some have thought it was. That the woman, she has kind of a simple mind. She likes staying home, and you know how it is. You women all just love to stay home and cook all the time, talk to the kids, wash out the diapers. They just love that. Now, men, their mind encompasses the world. They're out charging into the night. Big business deals, overcoming all, while the woman is just so happy to sit at home cleaning diapers. Isn't that right, ladies? You all agree with that, don't you? There's a lady down here shaking her head. She used to be in my congregation up in New England. Always was a troublemaker. Well, now, if you ladies don't agree with that, aren't men more intelligent? Now, let's think a moment. It really is thought that a man's job is more important than a woman's. That's not true. It really isn't. Now, you think about it. We have the image of men charging out into the world, and the man is vastly more intelligent. Come on, fellas. Weren't you in school? Don't you remember in school who made all those good grades? Was it the fellas? It was always some girl. Even when I went to college and took physics, it was some girl. She's the only one who could understand the professor past the first 5 minutes every day. They have made studies and found out that men and women have equal intelligence. That's right. They've got equal intelligence. So, why then is it the man? The Bible says the man is to be the head of the house. Now, why is that? Why did God say the man was to be the head of the house if women are every bit as intelligent? Or look at the jobs that they have. Now I know it's thought man's charging out and encompassing the world. You know something, fellas? The average woman has a more important job than the average man. That's a fact. Hour by hour, day by day, the average woman has a more important job than the average man. I hate to say it, but it's absolutely true. Now look, let's look at the average guy. He's an auto mechanic. Or he's a bricklayer, or a shoemaker. And let's say, here's this man charging out into the world to lay bricks that morning. See? Brick number 1. Brick number 2. Really conquering the world. Brick number 3. Or making shoes. We used to have a lot of shoemakers up in New England. You know, and some of the guys, their job was to grind off the edge of the sole. So there he was, and the shoes came down. 1, 2. Really conquering the world out there, fellas. 3. Now, you think about it. Why does a man work? Why do most of you men work? Is it because you're needed out there conquering the world? Come on. Your rich uncle gave you $500,000. How many of you men would stay in the job you're in? Huh? You're out there to get money, aren't you? That's why that guy's stacking bricks all day, conquering the world. Stack, stack, stack. Or you know, auto mechanic. Spark plug number 1, spark plug number 2, change tire number 1. You know, you think about it, you're there to make money. Now, why are you there to make money? So you can pay for the food to feed the kids. So you can put a roof over the house of your wife and kids. You know what's important in the whole business? The family. The kids. I mean, my wife says it's not totally true, but you think about it, as far as your job, most of us could be replaced by a money machine. That's it. That's all we are. But what is the wife doing? Since our job is to get money to provide a roof and food and shoes, what's the wife doing? She's at home. See, that's what we're working for, is at home. She's at home using the home. She's at home with the kids. And you think about it for a moment. She is working with eternity. You see, your job is to go out and get money so that she can work with eternity. So that she can train the kids. Now, I know when the man comes home, he's to be in charge. But basically, he's not home. He's gone. And that wife is there working with something precious. The house you build. The car you repair. The shoe you make. Someday is just going to rot away. But what is built into those children in their early years can last forever. You know something? It's a good thing that God put the man in charge when he comes home. If he didn't, fellas, we would have nothing. They'd have everything. The glory, the important job. Well, just a second now. God did put the man in charge. Now, I'm not saying that men and women are alike. Oh, no, let me tell you, isn't it nice they're not alike? You know, men and women are vastly different. And there is a reason God did put the man in charge. Not because he's more intelligent. Not because his job is more important. But there is a reason why God said the man should be the head of the house. No way around it. I mean, it's in the Word of God. He did say that. Because men and women are different. That's the reason. Now, how are they different? Now, let's think about it. Are men and women different physically? And let me ask you, are there any superiorities one way or the other? Now I might ask you, think about it, ladies. Do men physically have any superiorities? Is there anything where a man is superior? I know I'm talking in generalities. I'm speaking in general. Is there any way, now how many of you think there are ways in which men are superior physically? I do. I think so. I think men are stronger. I mean, it's nice. Men are stronger. My wife, when she has to open up something, she comes and has me open it up. When she has something heavy to lift, she comes and gets me. Now, I'm speaking in generalities. I'm sure there are probably wives stronger than their husbands somewhere. But in general, men are stronger. God made a difference between men and women. But now, fellas, would you say that women are superior in any way physically? How many of you would say women are superior in some way physically? Oh, I know they are. Yes. Women have great superiorities physically. Women are far better looking than men. Now, that is true. For instance, if you go in to get your car repaired at Joe's garage, and you go to pay for the bill, and there's a calendar back there from McCormick Spark Plugs or whatever, Champion Spark Plugs. Let me tell you, does that calendar, or wrenches, does that calendar have some half-nude fella standing there holding that wrench? Or Armstrong tires or whatever, has it got a half-nude man kind of standing there, and holding it and saying, won't you come down sometime and buy a tire? Or No, it's a girl, isn't it? Absolutely. Women have got it made in the beauty scene. Now I'm speaking in generalities. In general, girls are so much prettier than men. That's why we have, the beauty contest are not fellas. I mean, there may be some weirdo contest somewhere over on the side. But it's not nationally televised, and you don't find me watching it. But beauty contests basically are reserved for those who are beautiful. God made women soft, lovely, just unusually designed in such a nice way. Now those are differences. We can see that physically. We can see those differences. But now, let me tell you, men and women are also different mentally. Not in intelligence, but in emotions. That's right. And you know what the differences are? Exactly the same as they are physically. If my kids have a bicycle stuck between the tree and it's heavy, they come get me to lift it. But if they got a scratch on their hand or something, and they're looking for a nice soft lap to cuddle up in, they don't usually come to me. Bunch of bones. That's all they get. Same thing is true emotionally. God, in general, don't get upset now. In general, God tended to make men stronger emotionally. Now wait before you all walk out. All the ladies, that is. God tended to make women more lovely, more responsive. Now just think about it for a moment. Who is it that goes around telling sick jokes all the time? Is it women? When a fellow gets his plate for breakfast and it's scrambled eggs, and a little kid's there and he looks at it and he says, who sneezed on my plate? Is that women? Is that women? See, men are strong. They can kind of resist that. They can just take their mind and lock it like a steel door and say, nope, that won't bother me. I'm going to use it to make fun. Little boys have, since the beginning, I'm sure Cain and Abel used to love to tease their mother with worms. Doesn't bother little boys. But a woman is responsive. I mean, she looks at that worm, she responds emotionally to it. Or kind of like my wife was saying, we saw a little child playing, or she did, with a little box. Now, girls can like worms too. I'm just speaking in general. Little box there, and it had a huge beetle in it. And she brought that to services over here, and she's sitting there and sits down, opens up her little box, brings her little live beetle out, it runs around, she plays with it in the services, she sticks it in, covers it up. She's probably here with it today. I saw a lady look around over here. Now, I've got a son that would like to bring a little snake. And as my wife said, she said, you know, if he brought a snake, none of the mothers sitting nearby would hear a word of the sermon. Isn't that a fact? Little boy, you can sit there and play with a snake, you know, and all the girls, ooh. They don't like that. You know, men and women are different when they buy an automobile. Automobile manufacturers and salesmen have proved that. Men want to know about the torque, about the horsepower, about the warranty. Now, I'm not saying women don't, but I'm saying in general, it's men who tend to buy Hot Rod magazine, various mechanical magazines to find out about an automobile. He's going to be logical about this. You know, just absolute logic. And when he buys his automobile. But they find women are far more impressed with the way the car door shuts. You know, the sound that it makes. Or if you sit inside, the smell of it. Or is it comfortable when it goes down the road? Is it pleasant to ride in? Now you can say, aha. What is more important? Is it more important to be able to afford a car, to have one that's going to run right, and get down the road? Isn't that far more important? Well, now, just a second. If all we do in life is get down the road, what is the worth of living if we can't enjoy it too? If all you do is go from one thing to another. Now, God put the man in charge for one reason alone. He gave him the strength physically and emotionally that is necessary for family survival. Not that man's attributes are better, are more important, because God is lovely in his outlook. Beauty. He has emotional response. He is also strong. He has both. And he gave equally, one to women and one to men. But he had to put somebody in charge. So he chose the one to whom he had given strength for the necessity of family survival. How many women get married and find out after a while their husband's just like their father was? Oh, I mean to tell you, I have heard women talk about men and say, oh, he thinks he's so logical. Everything has to be so rational. And men will say, oh, she gets so emotional. I mean, she's so illogical. No, she's logical for her. But they just think differently. Now, the same thing. You know, if men and women go to buy a house, the man's worried about the mortgage. What are the payments going to be like? Now, in general, I'm speaking. But a woman goes in and checks out the kitchen. And where are the curtains going to be? And what kind of carpet? And does this carpet match this, you know, over here? And is it going to match the furniture and all of this? Is it going to be lovely? Whereas the man's worried, you know, well, is the sewage going to be here? How about the drainage on the yard? Now, in general. See, he's going to be super logical. As a matter of fact, that causes problems, though. You know, I have had women tell me, not many, but I've had a few, that they would not have left their husband, I'm talking about women who left their husband, divorced them, had he just once in that last year said he loved her. But see, men are so tough. hard. They just emotionally steel themselves. They're capable of doing that. God gave them the ability to do that if they want. Or if you go out and normally, if you come home, fellas, and the toilet has broken down and it's all stuck or stopped or something like that, how often has your wife already fixed it? Some sweet wives do, but the average sweet wife doesn't. Now, I come in, I usually end up fixing all the toilets if they break down. But my wife makes sure the bathroom smells nice, she's got these things in there and she keeps it clean, she's all worried, if it isn't absolutely spotless, that bothers her terribly. And everything has to be so fragrant and nice in there. Now let me ask you, you could say, which is more important for survival? Well, you might say to have toilets work. So men are better than women, right? Just a second. If all we ever have in life is toilets that work, what is the purpose of living? Is that what you want to do? Just all your life have a toilet that works? Isn't it nice to have a pleasant bathroom too? Isn't that really just as important? Maybe not as important for survival, but for a life, a full life, it definitely is. These things, though, these things can be misused by men or women. Their attributes and their strengths. And that's a problem, because men, God gave them the ability to be very, very logical. And that irritates some wives, because the man has to be so logical and just miss the feeling of the thing. And they have that, they misuse it. What's the average person think of a real man? A man's man. Matt Killam. He goes out, and really, you think of that as a man, the strong, silent type. He goes down the street. Dum, dum, bang! Not an expression on his face. He walks over to the body, turns it over with his foot, and he says, "I'm sorry I had to do that, but it was my job, grandmother." Just really tough. You know how far it has gotten. Not only do men like to tell sick jokes, to watch women scream. It's kind of like David John Hill said yesterday. He talked about the paper. I don't need to review all of that for you, do I? But he said if his wife was here, she would have said, "Oh, John, why do you do that?" See, but that doesn't bother John Hill at all. But it would bother his wife. My wife, when I speak, she wants to go off in the corner somewhere. I embarrass her. And it tends to be that way so often. But it can get bad. Men can really get bad. I have seen where there has been an awful auto accident. I mean a really terrible one, to where there's been a lot of loss of human life. And little boys will get a kick out of in detail describing every last bloody bit to guts and the whole things just to upset girls in school. Can you imagine that? I have actually known of them to get a box and put their finger through in the bottom and wrap a napkin around it and put blood where it looks like there's a loose finger in there, and come in and say it was from the auto accident. And watch the girls get... Now you think about it. You think about that for a moment. And even though all the fellows think that's cute, but let me tell you something. Isn't it sad that a man can so emotionally steel himself that he can take the tragedy of human beings and their lives snuffed out and make sport of it? You see, a man can steel himself from that. He can just mentally lock off those other human beings and their suffering. But girls can't do that very easily. You see, they emotionally respond. They can feel for that person in that accident. That's why they make such good nurses. Now, I'm not saying that all men are just callous and crude. I'm saying, in general, men often tend to do that, and that's a misuse. That tends to be an extreme of a misuse of a God-given ability that men have. When men and women have problems, husbands and wives, how many men can sit down and talk to their wives about it? You know, the average man, if there's a problem, what's he do? You know, out the front door, slam into the automobile and down to the corner bar. He usually won't even talk about it. That's a big problem in marriage counseling, is trying to get a man to say anything. See, he'd rather just steel himself off for it and emotionally be strong, be silent, and refuse to even talk about it. And that's where you get into this problem that men so steel themselves that men have a terrible, terrible time trying to tell their wife that they love them. Oh, I know they can do it. They can stand up, you know, like the honeymooners, come in and say, babe, you're the greatest. You know, honey, I really love you. How many men can very seriously look their wife right in the face and say, dear, I really deeply, deeply respect you, love you, and I'm thankful for you. Do you know many men would rather go to the dentist to have tooth pulled than do that? But that doesn't mean that women have it all. I mean, you know, women misuse the emotional responsiveness that God has given them. The beauty that God has given them emotionally, women misuse same way. Oh, men get they get so provoked at women because women are so sensitive. I mean, some little tiny thing, it seems like. He didn't notice her dress. And he is in trouble. Oh, because she got her hair done, and he didn't notice. So sensitive. And men think, why don't they logically analyze things? Like that movie, My Fair Lady, where he went around singing, why can't a woman be like a man? That was so illogical, so emotional. You know, it reminds me of a time, and just to show you the difference between men and women, there was a fellow up in New England that lost his job and was out of work. And he happened to be over at somebody's house for a party. And one of the men who was there went up to him and said, hey, pretty good, you know, you're out of work. Go to a lot of parties, why, that's the way, you know. And he kind of teased him a little bit about going to different people's houses in order to eat, which of course he wasn't doing. Now, you know, this man who was doing the teasing didn't think anything about it. He was just teasing this other fellow a little bit. But you know something? The guy who was doing the teasing, his wife heard it. Now, you see, she was different. She responded to that poor fellow out of a job. I mean, she really felt, well, that poor man really is out of work. Oh, and it just hurt her. And then to have her husband tease that man about it. Oh, she got mad. Oh, you know, the guy came home. He didn't know what his wife was mad about. Yeah, she wouldn't talk to him. He said, you're mad. No, I'm not. And he couldn't figure it out. But you see, it didn't bother him that sure, he would like to see the guy have a job, but he wasn't emotionally involved with that fellow's problem. But his wife was. She just responded deeply to that. Now, even the Bible shows how men and women are different. If you might remember over in 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 14, we saw a difference between Adam and Eve. 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 14. It says, Adam was not deceived, but the woman, being deceived, was in the transgression. Now, it doesn't say Adam wasn't in a transgression. Last I recall, he got tossed out the garden too. But it was the case here where she was deceived. Adam was not deceived. Let's go back and look at that. You know, it's easy for women to respond. And to some bad things. We came from Florida. I always called it paradise, and my wife always called it roach heaven. Back in the book of Genesis chapter 3. Matter of fact, when we first got there, we were using someone else's house. They'd gone, and they had a pull-out bed. And my wife pulled the bed out, you know, one of these hide-a-beds. She pulled the thing out, and you know how they kind of flip up the bed? When it pulls, it goes flip, and a roach flipped right up on her nightgown. Oh, I see some ladies squirming out here. Oh, she did some squirming too. Ah! You know, I could always tell that either the heat had just come in the door, or she saw a roach from the other end of the house. Ah! Anyway, this roach flipped up on her, and she's banging it away. Well, you know, I was tired, and, you know, we got the bed straightened out, and I got in bed. And the roach was gone. And lay down, I was real tired, and, you know, the light went out, and I was just lying there really. You know how all of a sudden you can be almost asleep and you realize something's wrong? I was lying there, all of a sudden I realized Lucretia wasn't there. I was I reached over, there wasn't anything there. I said, Lucretia, where are you? She said, I'm standing over here. I mean, the lights are out. It's been out. You know, about 10, 15 minutes, as far as I know. I said, why don't you get in bed? She said, that roach was in there. She just staying there all night, I guess. So I said, dear, let me tell you, that roach has no malevolent feelings against you at all. He's just doing his little roach job that God gave him. He's gone now. And he can't hurt you. No one has ever died that I know of from a roach eating them. You know, I wasn't quite that sarcastic. Let me say, I tried to be very nice, you know, to help bring her over to bed. And she said, Fred, sit on it. No, she didn't say that. She didn't say that. No, she didn't. I don't know what that means. I see it on happy days. She didn't say that. She came over and she got in bed. I've got to tell you, she didn't say that. I'd be in trouble, I'll tell you, bad. Anyway, here in Genesis 3, beginning in verse 1, and you got to remember now, Eve was deceived. Look at the difference between the man and the woman here. At least look at the way the woman reacts. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the eternal God had made. And he said unto the woman, now here the serpent comes up. Now notice who he talks to. Does he go to Adam? You know, encyclopedia salesmen are trained to make sure the woman is there. Either talk to the woman alone or make sure the woman is there. Never try to sell to a man. I've had salesmen come to the door, and I open the door, you know, and they say, is your wife here? They don't even want to sell to me. They don't want to talk to me. They want to talk to the woman. And you know what they're instructed to do? They get this chart, these encyclopedia salesmen, and they begin flipping through. And here's how much the average person who hasn't graduated from high school. Only grammar school, how much they earn on average. And then they wonder how they get all these figures. Then they flip it. Here's how much the average person who has graduated from high school earns. And then they, thousands of dollars difference. Then they flip that and they come to college. And here's how much a person with 4 years of college earns on the average. Thousands of dollars more than those in high school. And they go on about how this encyclopedia is going to do it. Now, that's pretty persuasive. This encyclopedia is only going to cost you $600-700. And your kids are going to earn thousands of dollars extra every year. Now, but the man sitting there thinking, how many kids use an encyclopedia for anything but, to put in the kitchen to stand on to get cookies out of the jar or something. And that's about it. Well, do they read it? My parents had an encyclopedia. I don't remember ever cracking it, but they had one there. And the man sitting there thinking that, but you see the woman's responding to this emotionally. Now, that's not bad. I think encyclopedias are good. Are they worth, $500 to $700 is another question. Maybe the man knows, we just can't afford that. But salesmen like to talk to women because they respond to this need that is presented emotionally. And that's exactly what Eve did. Eve was not stupid. She wasn't dumb. She just responded emotionally. Adam was sitting over there. He knew what was going on. Just because he was logical. I'm going to be logical, not let this serpent talk me into anything. And the serpent comes up. Has God said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? Now you can just imagine this woman. The serpent comes up and begins chewing the fat, and she says, well, now, this poor serpent doesn't understand. Women make excellent teachers, very patient. Unless something frustrates them too much, but they tend to respond to little children. Be very patient with them. And the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. She's going to explain it. Make sure just like men can usually spank harder than women. Because men logically say this little kid needs it. And he can kind of steal himself from all that crying and go ahead and spank. Whereas the woman, she's just feeling every last one of those blows. I'm not saying men don't. I don't like to spank my children either, but I can do it. And most men can do it a little easier and a little harder than women. Now, she's explaining, serpent, we can eat of it. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said unto the woman, you shall not surely die. For God does know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Now what did she do? Did she say, boy, I want to take some of that evil tree? Man might do that. Just enjoy going out and doing something really rotten. Throwing bricks through windows and that kind of business. But the woman didn't do that. Notice, when the woman saw that the tree was good, not bad, for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, not ugly, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. Now what do you call that? You call that emotionally responding. She took of the fruit thereof, and I notice this, most ladies are like this. They find something good, they want to share it with their husbands. She didn't find anything bad. To her, this was good. This was pleasant, desirable. Not something evil and ugly and dirty. This wasn't a dirty joke to her. This was something beautiful. She thought this was something dirty and bad. She wouldn't have wanted anything to do with it. It's men who enjoy the dirty stories. See? Anyway, she gave to her husband with her. And this, notice, with her. It doesn't say, he might have been. He was going to really rise up and do well. And he married a very promising, and talented girl. But I remember they had been married a couple of months, and they had ladies' night. And the man brought his wife. He was one of the few that they had back then, married students. And they asked the ladies for comment. So the topics master said, now, Mrs. So-and-so, would you rise and tell us how your husband serves you? And she said, well, he thinks it's my job to serve him, not his job to serve me. And the embarrassing moment. Terrible. And that fellow never did produce anything in God's church with all the talent and the ability he had. And it was his marriage that basically did it. Because he thought his wife, that being head of the house meant that his wife was to serve him. I don't know whether she was having to clean his toenails or what. But that was so wrong. The reason he is the head is to protect his family, to ensure their survival, to protect his wife. That's why God gave him certain strength. Occasionally I have to tell my wife something and lay down the law to her. Now, it's very rare. I'm not superior to my wife, except in the fact that I've been given certain strengths and she's been given certain things. And where we differentiate there, but she is equal in value and ability and intelligence. But here's the thing. Occasionally I've had to tell my wife, we're going to do this. For instance, there's one thing my wife wants to hear nothing of, and we wouldn't have if she had anything to do with it, and that's heavily insure me. Now, I'm heavily insured. I went down and got one of these cheap policies, 1 year renewable term. At night, less than $300 a year, and $100,000 I'm insured. She could be a wealthy woman if I got kicked off. $100,000. Now, she wasn't happy to do that at all. Oh, I don't even want to hear about it. And I've tried to sit down with her and tell her, now look, if I get killed, here's what you need. You need to invest some of that. You need to diversify it. Maybe put a little over here in this and a little in that because you're going to have a long haul to go with it. I don't even want to hear it, she says. She'd be miserable without me and all this kind of business. She don't want to hear it. But let me tell you something. Whether she likes it or not, I make her sit down and listen and I get the insurance. Because God has given me the responsibility to protect that family. To just logically say, look, Fred, you may die. Make sure they survive, whether I'm alive or dead. And in the same way, when they started putting seatbelts in cars. Now, I know a lot of you don't wear seatbelts, and that's fine. You think, well, you're going to get hit on the side, and then you'll burn up and all of that. And that may be true, but I just logically tend to believe the statistics. And so, when they put seatbelts in cars, and I mean to tell you, Lucretia didn't want to wear them. They were uncomfortable. They weren't pleasant. They emotionally were bad. And I said, you're going to wear a seatbelt. And I do, boy, I'm mean enough that I make her wear a seatbelt. Now, she's gotten to where she's used to it now, and she feels uncomfortable without it. But I made her do that, whether she liked it or not. And besides, I encouraged her. There's a sign where my brother used to work at the exit, and it says that no one has ever been killed and we wear our shoulder harnesses too. No one has ever been killed at speeds of 55 miles an hour or less wearing both the seatbelt and shoulder harness. And I don't drive but about that speed, so I tell her, look at it this way, dear. We know we're going to make it back alive. And in case we don't, we'll be famous. You might as well look at the good, bright side. Unfortunately, some men have thought, and it was in ignorance, that they were the head of the house so their family could serve them. Fellas, no. No. You are the head in order to make the family survive. Some have thought, well, I'm the head, that means if we've got money, and I want a new shotgun, I buy the shotgun. I want to take a vacation here, and the wife wants to go the other place, we go where I want. Because I'm the head, that's what God wants. Oh, ghastly. What an awful perversion of what God wants. God has put you there to logically serve your family. You see, you're no better. You're not even more intelligent. And you're sure not as sweet and pretty. Well, now I'd like to turn over then to 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3. And here is the last bastion of male supremacy. In 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 7. By the way, I gave this sermon a couple of years ago in St. I had about 8 people, and not all ladies, surprisingly, asked me to give it again. One fellow said, "Oh, sure we should give that here." And I said, "But you heard it down there." He said, "Oh, I want to hear it again." There's a man who appreciates beauty. Let me just tell you, my wife has taught me a lot about beauty, and my little girls. You want to know something? Might bother you. I have learned to play with dolls and enjoy it. Now, I don't have my own dolls, unless you count the 2 little ones who run around. And I have 2 boys and 2 girls. Let me tell you, the boys and the girls are different. But I learned when my first little girl began to reach, where she could sit up and play, I began to learn to play with dolls. I could sit down with that little tiny thing. I just love ruffles and little bows on little bottoms. I mean, that is so nice to hold that little soft, fluffy, little ruffly thing, a little hair with a ribbon in it, and to sit down and play dolls. Daddy get down on the floor and just sit there and we play with the dolls. Oh, is that fun? You see what life is for? Life is to learn from each other. God wants us to all be emotionally responsive. And God wants us all to learn to control our emotions. Women can learn from their husbands. In an auto accident, usually, women will go to pieces. Now, not all the time. Women don't hate me for that, but that is just a fact, whereas men will often get up and start moving the bloody bodies around, and they'll just steel themselves and do the job. Now, a lot of men go to pieces, and a lot of women are calm. I'll have to say that. Some women are definitely stronger emotionally than some men. And you might say some men are definitely more emotionally responsive. Some women are just absolutely like a steel trap door for something in their life has caused that to happen to them. That's sad. But basically, we're here to learn from each other, and women to learn to control their beautiful emotions and their responsiveness and that which makes beauty. God gave women the ability to make a beautiful world. Who's wearing all the color out here, basically? All the bright reds and the greens and such, and all the jewelry. There's the beauty. Wouldn't it be an ugly, dull, dead, drab, cold world without women and their personality? What would be the value of life if all we had was a bunch of men running around basically in blue and dark suits, white shirts? Now, what would be the value of it? Cold and hard world. No. There is beauty, really, in both men and women. And there is strength in both men and women. And we're to learn from each other. Now here, though, you say, well, what is this then? What is this? In 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. Likewise, you husbands,
dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife, as unto, here you are, fellas, you've been waiting, you've been sitting back there thinking, I knew we were superior. Giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel. There. So now we have it, the women really are inferior. Right there it says they're the weaker vessel. Now, just a second. What do you mean by weaker vessel? Think about it. He didn't say to the inferior vessel, did he? Anybody read that in there? It says giving honor unto the inferior vessel. Now, the word vessel just means, like a cup or a goblet or a bowl, something like that. Now, let me ask you, what do you give honor to around your house? Now, I have a couple of little things up here. This is a glass. I've got to be very careful because my wife right now is very nervous about this. This glass was given to us when we left Boston. We were given two of them. And we didn't think, a couple gave it to us, we didn't think anything about it until we happened to go by a store that had some. $30 a piece. It's this lead crystal with, carved. $30 a piece. Some of you probably have seen these things. She didn't want me to bring this. And, we got careful with it. You know what we use them for now? Occasionally somebody will be wanting to be married, they'll come by our house. And the wedding will be performed there, and I'll go buy a bottle of champagne. And about the only time we ever use these is when the couple gets, drinks the champagne toast. We use these. Some of you can't see it in the back. It's lovely glass. And we use these for the married couple to drink their first toast out of when they get married. And it is beautiful. $30 a piece. Now that is a vessel. That is a vessel. Now I have another vessel here. This is a Presto cooker canner. It's a really good one. And my wife does a lot of canning in it. Doesn't do as much in Florida as we would like to. Boy, that is tough. It is a heavy one. You know how much that thing cost? I happened to go through the store the other day. $30. $30 for that thing, that canner. It's a real high quality when you can can a lot of food in it. And I mean, it is strong. Now, they're both worth $30, but let me tell you something. Which one are you going to put on your hutch? You see, it says here, giving honor unto the weaker vessel. Now, there's no question which one of these vessels is stronger. And as a matter of fact, if all we had to worry about was survival, which one would we use? I mean, if survival was important, would you get a big crock? Would that be important, or a little goblet? As far as survival goes. Well, I think a big crock would be more important. And you could take it and stand. Matter of fact, you could take this, put it down. That's tough. I can get right on it. My wife said she was going to sit in the corner if I did this and hide. But I could stand on this and reach up for something. Boy, I like being tall like this. That's nice. As a matter of fact, I was trying to figure how to get that glass here without breaking it. You know how I did it? Some of you got it figured out? I wrapped it in newspaper and carried it in this thing. And I didn't think about it until after I had done it, that this thing was protecting that. I mean, I had it, I put it in there, and I carried it out, and I thought, seriously, look at that. Now, you'd say this is more important for survival if you had to choose between the two, or if you were going to have a crock, back at the time when he's talking about some big earthen crock that you might have pickled stuff in or salted stuff to keep it, or some pretty little goblet, which one would be more important for survival, the big crock? But let me ask you now, if all you do in life is can goods, if all you do is salt down fish, if all you do is have some big crock for meat, and you never sit down and enjoy a nice glass of champagne or wine with dinner. I mean, when you have dinner, is this what you're going to want? You would get crocked, wouldn't you? I don't want that on my table when I'm having wine. No, I don't think a life of Presto, and I don't mean to offend the Presto company, I don't think a life of Presto cooker canners is going to be valuable. I think a life of champagne glasses adds the dimension that makes life worthwhile. Now, this is the weaker vessel. And fellas, your wife is a weaker vessel. But for you to think, inferior, there's no way this glass is inferior. They both cost $30. My wife would have preferred I brought a $4 pot and a $4 champagne glass because she's worried I was going to break this. But I wanted to bring something valuable because both men and women are extremely valuable and equal if we would only learn it and learn from each other. So when he says that she is the weaker vessel and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that's why your wife, fellows, is your glory. She is your beauty. She is what adds value to your life. If only we would enjoy it. Now, occasionally your wife isn't beautiful. I tell my wife and I tell others, like I'm doing now, that occasionally living with my wife is like living with Satan. However, occasionally living with me is like living with Satan. Because we're all subject to the influence of those little wavelengths of Satan going around. So I expect her to act nasty on occasion. She expects me, it's only good if it doesn't happen at the same time, it helps a great deal. Because for the most part, living with my wife is like living with God. Because she has so many of the attributes of God. And I hope that living with me is occasionally, and as much as possible, like living with God. When God's kingdom comes, God is going to remove the battle of the sexes, and He's going to bring about the appreciation of the sexes, to where people realize there is no inferiority, there is no superiority, there is only beauty, strength, and harmony. So fellas, take your wife, give her a pinch right where she was intended to be pinched, gently. Enjoy each other. Don't let your prayers be hindered. Thank God for the difference between men and women.
Additional programs and literature available at hwalibrary.com.